Hello everyone and welcome to this online question and answer session on our road service. My name is Stephen, I'm a full-time communications officer with the Council and very much a part-time question and answer presenter. We've had nearly 70 responses to our plea for questions, so thanks to everyone for their input. Over the next 30 to 45 minutes, we'll look to answer as many of these questions as we can. The real experts in the room today are the panel. I'm joined by the Council's Communities Committee Vice Chairman, Councillor John Martin, and Roads Construction and Maintenance Manager, Mike Fox. Welcome to you both, gents, and thanks for taking part today. The Council committed to undertaking a review of our road service earlier this year, and this question and answer session is very much part of our engagement with the public and our residents as part of this review. As well as this Q&A, we also have a survey running until late in October, and we're meeting our partners and stakeholders via virtual meetings to get their input. One last bit from me before we get started with the questions. This is obviously a pre-recorded session, but it'll be filmed as live. So if we make the odd mistake or the sound quality isn't absolutely nailed on, please bear with us. Okay, that's enough from me for the time being. On with the show. We've tried to group questions together so we're not jumping about too much. So the first few are on roads maintenance. So Mike, if I can come to yourself. Why, when we're filling in potholes, do we not seal the joints to stop water penetration and the inevitable failure the following winter?
Thanks very much, Stephen. This particular question is an issue that we actually get inquiries from the public quite routinely. The issue of top sealing of pothole repairs is actually an issue that has been investigated actually at national level about how we actually achieve a permanent repair and stop water getting into repairs. The national specification for repairs actually only requires sealing of pothole repairs on the bottom and the side surfaces. So what you'd actually see nowadays is not the old-fashioned style of sealing on the actual road surface. The Council uses national specifications in carrying out the pothole repairs, and I think it's important that what people may have seen in the past, technology has changed with materials that we use, and the Council has really followed national best practice in how we actually carry out these repairs. So it's unlikely that you're going to see very much top sealing of repairs in the future.
And on a similar theme, Mike, why do we continue to use the temporary filling material then that gets blown into the holes without, as you say, sealing?
Again, Stephen, a very interesting question. The question alludes to the repair process of jet patching. Jet patching was actually developed in New Zealand, but is used widely through the UK and within Europe. And in essence, it is a permanent repair. There's best practice guidelines out there, and again, the Council uses tried and tested repair methods when we're actually carrying out pothole repairs, and this particular method of repairing is very successful. It's not the solution to every type of repair, but it is a permanent repair, and if the workmanship is absolutely correct, then it will remain a permanent repair.
And sticking with the maintenance theme, why do we dress roads that have perfectly good tarmac surfaces?
I would say, Stephen, that surface dressing probably for many people seems to be the bane of their life during the summer months. The aspect of surface dressing or spraying and chipping, maybe if it's known to others, has been a practice that's been used for many years, not just in the UK, but it's used worldwide. It's absolutely crucial for any roads authority to be able to surface dress, because it actually can extend the life of a road by up to 15 years. And what you will find is that we have to do interventions with surface dressing probably 4 to 5 years after a road has actually been resurfaced. and that's entirely with the view of extending the life of that road when it's been resurfaced previously. There are many issues about surface dressing that's caused angst for drivers and cyclists as well, but if the procedure is carried out correctly and the aftercare of the sites is carried out correctly, then that absolutely minimises the effects for the travelling public.
So the other side of that coin, I guess, and Mike, why do we tend to patch multiple areas of a road when in reality perhaps the whole road needs a resurface?
Thanks, Stephen. This particular question again it gets raised quite routinely. The important thing to remember is that every road that the council has responsibility for gets inspected, and during that inspection our technical staff will carry out assessments as to the number of repairs that are required. If there's a section of road that has multiple potholes in, then the calculation will take place where we actually determine what percentage of that section of road is actually requiring repair. If the area of patching required exceeds 40%, then we would actually carry out an intervention that would involve resurfacing and not carrying out any patching. So there is a threshold where we will stop patching and actually carry out a full resurface in that section of road.
Just a couple more questions on maintenance and then we'll bring John in. Tourism is obviously big business here in Dumfries and Galloway like it is across Scotland. Do we prioritise the resurfacing of tourist routes?
Tourist routes within Dumfries and Galloway are numerous. Dumfries and Galloway is always a very rural region, and it relies heavily on tourists into the area as part of its economy. Within the council and the public road network that we actually maintain, there's a hierarchy, and the hierarchy is a series of scores that are contribute to the overall value of that particular road within the road network. And one of the contributing factors to that score is the tourist traffic. Now that could relate to either a main A-class road through the region, but it can also be relevant for an unclassified road that has a tourist attraction at the end of that particular road. So there is a weighting attributed to the maintenance that's likely to be carried out on a road based on tourist figures.
And finally then on maintenance, someone's asked, I would like to see the roads resurfacing project planned for each week and month ahead. Is this something that's available on our website or anywhere else?
Thanks, Stephen. The issue about what I would term public information is a piece of work that we've been trying hard over the last few years to get better at. We instigated a project a few years ago where we were looking to provide real-time information for people. They could identify roadworks that were being carried out currently, works that were planned, be it in the next week or be it further down the line. What's happened at the moment is that we've pulled back from that, but we're actually looking to develop it in a slightly different way as part of a digital strategy that public are able to access information, good quality information, accurate information, and the issue about it being real time, and anybody can then access the information to look at their particular street or some other location, and they can identify if there's any works planned for that location.
So we've focused quite a bit on roads there in the first 10 minutes or so. John, if I can bring you in on the subject of street lights, please. Someone's asked, why do we have so much street lighting?
The council as a roads authority has no statutory requirement to provide street lighting, but it does have a network of lights. I think roughly about 24,000 lights we've got throughout Dumfries and Galloway. that have been added to and improved over the years with a significant investment to change all lighting to LED. This has also helped to reduce the impact of light pollution by utilising the latest technology, which is quite important in this region because we've got the Dark Skies Park, which brings in quite a bit of tourism. The number of street lights provided by the council is always being reviewed around the most up-to-date design standards, and this can allow a reduction in the number of columns when refurbishment is planned. I know that as an example. I've had a couple of my constituents on the phone. They've had a light outside their house for say 30 odd years, but when the new replacements have been there for the LED, this light has been removed because the way they work it out, it wasn't needed when they put the new LED lighting in. So, as I say, there is winners and losers when we come to replacing the street lighting.
So for the good number of questions on active travel, Mike, if I can bring yourself in on this please. Dumfries and Galloway has minor roads giving good recreational cycle routes. However, many of these roads are used by fast-moving timber lorries. Can the council work with timber transport industries to make the routes safer for cyclists?
Thanks, Stephen. This is very much a hot topic for the service. Timber transport across the region is an absolutely crucial element in many aspects. The economy within Dumfries and Galloway and the spin-off from business within the Dumfries and Galloway. But the whole aspect about managing timber transport is absolutely crucial and something that we've been actively involved with for many years. The council operates what's termed an agreed routes map, which is basically an agreement between the industry and the council as to how the two parties will interact and agree how timber should be dealt with within Dumfries and Galloway. And the agreed routes map is absolutely crucial to the point in the question, because the agreement that's set up clearly identifies the routes that hauliers should be using to remove timber from a particular forest within the region. And if that agreement is set out right at the start before any felling is actually in place, then the council knows exactly where the timber is going from and to, and the issues should a haulier choose not to use that agreed route, then we have mechanisms to intervene with them very quickly if it's based on accurate evidence that there has been a sort of breach of that care.
We'll stay on the theme of cycling. John, someone's asked, what plans are there to join up the gaps in the Dumfries town centre cycle network?
Well, we're currently looking at this as part of the Spaces for People programme across several town centres. The travel hierarchy will be prioritising moving forward for the active travel strategy when it's implemented, but due to recognition we will be taking for maintenance requirements for any new infrastructure that is provided.
And a follow-up to that, John, what firm proposals does the council have for implementing policies on active travel, in particular in relation to cycling?
Well, we're going to refresh the active travel strategy and revised implementation plan. This, along with embedded Sustrans officer, to develop a new programmes and proposals strategically. As part of the active travel strategy, we will be working across all departments to address this issue, and are working with Sustrans to bring in an embedded officer that will assist in addressing with such issues. Town centre regeneration work will also prioritise the facilitating active travel. This will include proposals for the strategic development of active travel facilities, links and connections in and around Dumfries, with appropriate funding from external sources. Back
to the maintenance, Mike, if I can come to yourself, but specifically for cycle paths this time. What maintenance is routinely scheduled on the region's cycle paths?
Okay, Stephen, the cycle paths in the region are, of two types really. There's off-road cycle paths and there's on-road cycle paths. What we have in place, regardless of whether it is a cycle path or a public road, we have a safety inspection regime in place. So every single cycle path will be inspected, and during that inspection there will be possibly defects picked up. The defects can vary. Defects can be from a pothole in the road or in the cycle path to it could be overgrown trees and scrub. What we would then do, once these have been identified, is that we would then plan an intervention and actually arrange for it to be cut back or the repair in the pothole to be carried out.
So you mentioned maintenance, Mike, and looking at interventions. Who carries that work out, and what's the kind of workforce numbers for doing that?
The intervention that I talk about there very much has to be on a planned basis, unless there is something that is picked up during the inspection that is and requires almost immediate action, then it has to be planned in. The workforce levels that we're talking about, I mean, across the road service we're looking at, it does fluctuate slightly, but at the moment we're looking at a figure of just over 50 manual workers within the service. That's across Dumfries and Galloway, so that has to be spread across all types of maintenance activity. So the need to plan in the repairs is absolutely crucial, that it's not necessarily something that we can immediately react to unless it's an unsafe situation.
I think that number of 50 is a real stark reminder of where we are as a local authority. You know, personally speaking, you think that there's hundreds and hundreds of road workers, but clearly there's not. So we look to communities and partners to give us a hand where we can. John, I think you mentioned earlier that we've looked to do this on parts of the cycle route. Would you like to share that with the viewers?
Yes, Stephen, I think some of the major employees in Dumfries and Galloway, and even some of the smaller employers, they actually have volunteer days when, as I say, they volunteer. Some of the workers they've got take time for maybe one day a year, which doesn't seem a lot, but one day a year, and they go out and clean the likes of cycle paths and different things like that. They've actually cleaned beaches, but as I say, I know of there's certainly one employer, they take a day and they clean a stretch of cycle path. So as I say, as things get far tighter and budgets get smaller, I think this will be really welcome if there are more volunteers willing to do this type of work.
So there we go, a wee recruitment drive there. If you or your employer would be interested in helping us out, then get in touch with us and we'll certainly provide training and equipment and such like. We'll go back to a question now on cycle parking. Come to yourself for that, John. Will the council provide cycle parking near to shops and town centres across the region?
As I said earlier, we're looking at this as part of Spaces for the People programme across several town centres. We're also looking at the street furniture in quite a few of the towns around about Dumfries and Galloway. So, as I say, when we're doing that, street furniture is not just bins, etc. It may be that we'll be providing cycle where people can safely park, put their bike and lock it up to make sure it's quite safe while they go away. But as I say, this is certainly it's being looked at under the Spaces for the People programme.
Got a couple of questions now on staffing and planning. Mike, if I can come to yourself, please. Someone asks, Dumfries and Galloway is the second largest road network in Scotland. So therefore, why do we have more admin staff than we do actual road workers?
Thanks, Stephen. Again, a very pertinent question to be asked. We do have the second largest road network in Scotland. We have nearly 4,500 kilometres of road to maintain. But what sits behind the maintenance of that particular network is a whole series of pieces of legislation that require us as a council to comply with as like every other roads authority in Scotland. The legislation has grown over the years, and the requirement for the councils to comply with this has become even greater, to the point that some of the legislation over I would say the last sort of five or 6 years has involved the potential of councils being fined for non-compliance. And the fines that are possibly there are 5-figure sums. And these are fairly significant, although I know for a fact that already one local authority in Scotland has been fined because of its non-compliance. So these aren't actual pieces of legislation that are there but are never acted on. There's real pressure on councils now to make sure we're compliant, and hence the need to have staff in the back office dealing with these issues.
So you touched on the 4,500 kilometres of road there, Mike. That obviously leads to neighbouring authorities, the Borders, Ayrshire, Cumbria. How often do we meet with other councils to talk about how the roads link together and perhaps scheduling works, and even down to the smaller details like what sort of materials they're using?
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Stephen. The issue about sharing good practice, both locally but nationally, is absolutely critical for us. There are 2 organisations that are set up to help us do that. One of them is the Association of Public Service Excellence, known as APSE, and there's also SCOTS, which is related to sort of chief officers within road services within Scotland. And they're 2 subtly different arrangements. APSE deals a lot with assisting with benchmarking and looking at performance within services, not just road service. It deals with all services in the council. But the Scots arrangement is very much looking at ways of sharing what I would term best practice, and looking to develop procedures for roads authorities to help with particular situations. So they're both invaluable. We have staff members that sit on both groups, and the feedback from our attendance at those particular forums is absolutely crucial and will continue.
So we obviously don't carry out all works to the roads ourselves, and some are carried out by utility firms, sometimes even as an emergency if, God forbid, a sewer pipe blows up or maybe there's a power cut. So we've been asked, why do utility companies block pavements with signs relating to roadworks?
Thanks, Stephen. That particular issue links very quickly back to my previous sort of response to the issue about legislation and the requirements placed on councils. There's a significant piece of legislation that sits there which supports the arrangements for the Scottish Roadworks Commissioner. He is very, very, I would call, not draconian powers, but they've increased year on year. And the fact that it's not just roads authorities but it's utility companies that need to comply with this legislation. So the performance of utilities is measured and is recorded, and there are actual forums nationally for roads authorities and utilities to be questioned by the Commissioner on how we're performing. And like roads authorities I mentioned previously, utility companies have been fined under this particular legislation, and that comes down to poor performance. But the very basic issue that we're talking about here, which is I would say pavements being blocked by signage by utility companies, if anybody does encounter this, that it should not be happening, and if anybody does find it, then they should really try and contact the council through the main switchboard, and we'll have staff that will intervene.
So we've got 3 more questions to answer. This one's been put to us in relation to speed limits. someone's raised an issue of excessive speed in their estate where they live, and asked if we could look at it to a view to including it in a nearby 20-mile-an-hour zone. Is this something that we would do routinely, Mike, and how would someone go about approaching us with such a request?
Thanks, Stephen. Again, road safety, which is I would say the backbone to that question, is something that obviously for the Roads Authority is a primary issue. 20-mile-an-hour zones throughout the region have been developed and implemented at a variety of locations. The main driver for it was obviously schools, primary schools, and that's been undertaken. There are still some schools that still need to be assessed for a 20-mile-an-hour as well. What you will find is that in general, where there is a 20-mile-an-hour zone at a school, then it actually migrates into some of the adjacent streets. And what this question may allude to is that there's a possibility that somebody feels that a street adjacent to that 20-mile-an-hour zone should be included. And what we would normally do in those circumstances is that we would liaise with Police Scotland. Police Scotland are the enforcement agency in relation to speed limits, so they have to be happy that that particular street would be included. There's some basic information that we would look at, which would be collection of traffic speeds, looking at accident data. We would then collect that information in full detail and then speak with Police Scotland. But we would always, really at this particular time, we would always look for Police Scotland support to include anything within a particular speed limit.
So, finishing a cooler note, having worked with you for years, Mike, I would deem this one of your specialist subjects, winter weather. How often do we clear ditches on country roads to avoid flooding?
Thanks, Stephen. It maybe feels a bit like Mastermind when you're talking about specialist subjects. But at this particular time of year, believe it or not, but winter comes around at the same time every year. And the aspect about salting our roads and all that goes with winter, and it's not just salting our roads. Now, dealing with flooding is such a big issue for us in winter. The aspect about ditching, in particular, we have a network of ditches across the region, and as you can imagine, with 4,500 kilometres of road to maintain, it's not all rural, some of it is urban, but there's a vast swathe of ditch arrangement out there that we have to look after. The reality is that we don't get to every single ditch every year. That's just a reality because of the resources that we work with. But we endeavour to deal with the ones that we feel that are a priority and ones that have potential flooding issues relating to them. The proposal of dealing with ditches every single location, one of the aspects I'm currently looking at is it's a back to basics approach to some of our maintenance, and that's dealing with ditches and offlets and that type of thing to help deal with some of the flooding issues that we encounter, especially over the last few years within winter.
And the final question, Mike, will village streets and pavements be gritted regularly this winter?
Thanks, Stephen. Again, very much a pertinent question this particular time of year. The council has a winter service plan, and that is a fairly detailed document about how it delivers winter. That deals with all aspects, be it from when we grit, where we grit, and in sort of what order we do that. The aspect about villages and pavements, the policy is not set up to what I would term pre-grit footways prior to any ice forming in villages. It deals with high footfall areas such as town centre and Dumfries and some of the periphery footpaths. The The time when we will intervene is if there is a potential of snowfall, and we will then deploy resources into villages to deal with pavements and assist with that.
So that's us reached the end of the questions. Mike, do you have any closing remarks or anything that you would like to say that perhaps wasn't featured as a question?
Thanks, Stephen. What I would like to say is I would really like to thank everybody that has actually contributed to the providing questions. I think where the road service is going is actually becoming much more customer focused, and it's actually about listening and hearing what you members of the public have got to say.
And John, any closing remarks from yourself?
I think the only thing, I hope this has been pretty informative for anybody that put in the questions and it got them there. And the one thing I've got to reiterate, what Mike said, we've got 4,500 kilometres of roads in this region, but it goes on to the winter maintenance. As I say, the council is only responsible for certain amongst the roads. The A routes are the responsibility at Transco and part of the Scottish Government. So if you happen to see two gritters going along the same road, there might only be one grit and the other might be going from one place to another. Just got that in. And can I just say, the dark nights coming in, we've got a lot more cyclists on the road. The motorists, make sure they take care of them, and for the cyclists, could you make sure when it's dark you've got lights on your bikes and reflective clothing or something like that, especially light clothing, because we don't really want any accidents due to the darker nights coming in, the more cyclists on the road.
So that about wraps us up for the session today. I hope you found that useful and that this online question and answer session has given you a bit of understanding, assurance or even reassurance if it was needed that we're on the right road. If your question wasn't featured and you provided us with an email address upon submission, then we'll email you with an answer to your query in the upcoming days. Thanks again for watching, stay safe and take care. Thank you.